Unlike any other animal on the planet, we are by far the most adapted endurance creature. The top human ultra-endurance runners can even be superior to a horse when it comes to going for long distances.
When you combine the learnings from a top-level extreme endurance athlete with the wisdom of a health and longevity expert who has written 14 books, the first of them back in 1996, you have the amazing person who is our guest today, Brad Kearns, a two-time U.S. national champion and a number 3 world-ranked professional triathlete. You might learn today that the training you aspire to do is not the training you should do for your health.
I didn't know I was leading the race, and finally someone said, "You're it, dude." And I'm like, "What?" And I look back and there's no one behind me, and I look forward and there's no one in front of me. And what happened was...
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity Podcast. When you combine the learnings from a top-level extreme endurance athlete with the wisdom of a health and longevity expert who has written 14 books, the first of them back in 1996, you have the amazing person who is our guest today, Brad Kearns. You have also the requirement to stay tuned for this entire podcast. Now, when I said top-level extreme endurance athlete, this includes being a 2-time U.S. national champion and a number 3 world-ranked professional triathlete. More recently, he placed second in the 2024 USA Masters National Championships for his age group. That was in the high jump, right? I didn't have that in my notes. Is that right?
Yes, sir. The high jump, completely disparate from going on those long extreme triathlons.
Now, when I said wisdom, as I mentioned, he's been pushing his body to the limits of human performance starting way back in 1986. As I mentioned, he's written 14 books. He has a top-ranked podcast titled Be Rad. He even holds a Guinness World Record related to golf. He is here today to discuss his new book, Born to Walk, which was recently released and has already been endorsed by the likes of Stephen Gundry, Mark Bell, Ben Greenfield, David Perlmutter, and one of my favorites, Melanie Avalon. You might learn today that the training you aspire to do is not the training you should do for your health. Brad, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, great intro, Chris. And I love how you're going so deep on the podcast and doing such wonderful preparation. And we've talked a lot before we hit record. And I'm ready to bring my A game just like you do every time.
All right. Thank you so much. So on your website, your Meet Brad page starts with the word distraído, which is Spanish for distracted. A couple of paragraphs later, you describe your great strengths of focus, discipline, and competitive toughness, which is seemingly the opposite of distraído. A couple of things. I'm guessing you speak Spanish. I'd like to know where that comes from. And what is the difference between these two versions of Brad?
Sí, yo hablo español porque nací en Los Ángeles, California, practicando mucho durante de la mi vida. Y ahorita mi esposa, my wife, mi amor, is a Spanish speaking. And so she's my teacher. She's very strict. And if I forget a word and say, ¿Cómo se dice window again in Spanish? She'll say, I don't know. Because I gotta go look it up and keep to the highest standards. So it's kind of fun. The first thing I said for the English listeners was I was born in Los Angeles, and so I had a lot of opportunity to practice throughout my life. Y también mejorando cada día. I'm improving every day. I'm working at it. And that's nice that you looked into my life story page on my website. You and Melanie Avalon are probably the only hosts I've ever spoken to that took the time to go and hit that. But yeah, I was describing my behavior in school wasn't quite optimal, and I think I was easily bored. And Today, they label people ADHD, and it's kind of annoying because people have teased me about that before. My name is Brad, and one time I was interrupting a corporate meeting so frequently that finally, the MC guy, the guy who was trying to run the meeting, he says, "Okay, thank you very much, BRADD. Now let's continue with our meeting." And everybody around the table cracked up, and then I busted out one of those bio lines that you just said, and I said, "Raise your hand if anyone here has written more than a dozen books." And I said, "You know what? This meeting is run inefficiently. You two guys could have talked about that without any of us sitting here, but you kept talking and talking. So I'm purposely trying to keep this thing moving, and I don't appreciate the moniker now. Blah blah blah." So I got a little spice to me as well, but it's interesting because when you find your path and you find your calling and your destiny, John D. Martini calls it your inspired purpose, then you can be really focused, disciplined, and all those great things. And so I was captivated as a young person by the athletic world, and I wanted to be a quarterback in the NFL or perhaps a point guard in the NBA. And then I realized when I got to this huge public high school in Los Angeles that had championship teams that my destiny was going to be running in circles around the track because I was too small to do the other stuff. And so I got really deep into peak performance and training while I was still in high school. I hung around a couple buddies that were very serious runners. One of them, named Steven Deitch, was one of the top guys in the nation, and he drove us and pushed us hard to train even beyond what the program and the organized high school training was. And I reached up with a pretty good ranking. I was 12th in the nation when I was 16 years old, and was dreaming of a career as a collegiate runner. And I got to the NCAA Division I level at UC Santa Barbara. And then I got injured and sick 5 seasons in a row. And I just completely bombed out of my big dreams of being an athlete and getting better and better as a runner. And it was kind of devastating at the time because I would form my identity, obviously, as a lot of young people do, around my athletic endeavors and my athletic success. So I had to recalibrate everything. And the reason I'm telling this story here is because a lot of these experiences have framed how I write and coach and dispense information today. Because I learned that when you push yourself really hard and you're driven and focused and motivated, it can often become your worst enemy when you have that unregulated competitive intensity and you don't take proper care of your body. And I ran myself into these overuse injuries trying to keep up with what the coach was telling the workout was, or trying to, defeat my peers and all these things that didn't serve me at all. So I had to wake up and learn how to take care of my body and bring in aspects like proper diet and proper sleep, and especially regulating that competitive drive and that competitive intensity so that I could build and build and build without constant interruption from falling apart and catching another cold and getting another sore knee or sore ankle.
So you've spent your life at this balance, right? So it's not just keep training harder, which you tried and kind of failed, but also like, okay, I got another cold, maybe I need to back off on my training. Like, so you're doing this testing all along.
Yeah, and what's funny is that today in the fitness world, I mean, bigger and more popular than ever, and these major brands and these major modes of programming that everyone's familiar with, these brand names, we still honor and push this struggle and suffer ethos down the throats of well-meaning fitness enthusiasts. So when you set your alarm for 6 a.m. because there's a spin class conducted at that time, and you get into the room and the well-meaning teacher is blasting the music and encouraging you to sprint one more time for 30 seconds, pretend you're at the top of the mountain and you're going to win the Tour de France, and then everybody finishes and high fives, and you're filled with endorphins and you feel great because you got out of bed and you did something for your body, and all those things are positive. But then when we step back a few steps and reflect, when this becomes a pattern of pushing your body to medium to difficult intensity and grinding through these workouts day after day, even when you have busy, hectic, high-stress lifestyle in the background, what happens is the stress and rest balance scales become out of balance on the stress side. Because even though that 6 a.m. spin workout is refreshing and invigorating and energizing, it's also a form of stress to the body, just like the rest of the workday when you're dealing with difficult people in the conference room that call you names.
And spell out your names. So was that conference room experience part of your 11-week experience as an accountant in the largest accounting firm? Talk a little
Oh,
bit about
mercy.
how you ended up there and it lasted only 11 and a half weeks.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So, I was such a bombed out runner in college, and I told you it was a low point. And then I discovered this amazing new sport of triathlon. And this is back in the 80s when triathlon was barely getting going, but it was so fascinating and exciting to try to become competent in swimming, bicycle riding, as well as long distance running, which I already had down. But when I was able to swim and bike and mix up my training, I no longer got injured anymore. And so I was able to go out and compete in this triathlon sport and do pretty well as a college student. And it was so fun that I became obsessed with that. And that's all I thought about. And so I got hired at this prestigious job after graduating college, the world's largest accounting firm on the 17th floor in downtown Los Angeles, had to go buy some suits and become a corporate person. And that only lasted 11 weeks because the work was pure torture, especially when my mind was elsewhere and my dreams were in the direction of becoming a professional triathlete. So I announced my retirement after 11 and a half weeks, and I immediately commenced full-time training to try to make it on the pro circuit. And back then, there was really very minimal economic prospects to become a triathlete and earn a living at it. But what was great, and I tell this story frequently, is that I didn't care about any of that. I was just focused on the appreciation of the process and the journey that my life had become to dedicate myself to athletic training and as well as living a healthy, balanced lifestyle and eating well and getting my rest and my sleep and my stretching. So I went from corporate dude sitting in traffic every day to now I could, go to the swimming pool and work on my stroke and then pedal my bicycle into new territories and climb these amazing mountains all over Southern California. And so I was completely consumed by the process. There were no big economic prospects where I had to feel pressure or, the aspects that make athletics a business that can kind of make it tough. And what happened was, with this pure motivation, I call it, in other words, I was motivated purely by the love of the activity rather than external rewards or recognition. What happened was I was able to do pretty well, and I got better and better. And at the end of my first season as a rookie on the professional triathlon circuit, a complete unknown who was just racing around locally, and if I went to a big race, I'd get 17th or 21st or 23rd, far, far behind the top guys. But behind the scenes, I kept getting better and better, and I upset the top two ranked guys in the world in this magical race where I had a true peak performance effort. A lot of observers call it the greatest upset in the history of triathlon, and it will never happen again in that manner because the sport is so sophisticated now that you're going to hear about an up-and-comer on social media because he's going to be posting his times and his workouts. Yeah. But I had this tremendous upset victory, and that was what launched me into the beliefs and the circumstances that I really could make it as a professional triathlete. And that led to a 9-year odyssey where I traveled around the world and raced on the professional circuit. But I think everyone wants to reflect a little bit on the idea that if I had quit my job and went out there and trained with the idea of making a living and signing up all these sponsors and kicking butt on these great athletes who were so much better than me, I would have failed and struggled and possibly done myself in by pushing myself too hard and getting frustrated and getting down on myself. But instead, it was like I was floating along on this beautiful bubble. And my main celebration before I started winning the races was that I didn't have to go into traffic and go into the high rise every day.
So a couple of things. One, I want to dwell a little bit on ADD because I think this is something, my son has ADHD, and I think this is really something that a lot of people don't miss. When my son gets focused on something, it's actually hard to pull him off of that something, right?
Oh my gosh, that is such a great statement. Yeah.
Right. And so it can be, and right now it's computers and it's just gaming and there's no kind of path to success, right? He's not even gaming like I'm kind of watching. He's not even gaming in a way that he could make money, right? Like he's just having fun. And so I've got to push him, and I've got to push him outside of that environment and continually work on expanding what he enjoys to do, or at least trying and testing, because maybe he'll land on something like you did. But but a lot of people are like, oh, ADHD, they just can't focus. No, that's incorrect. You can focus so tightly on something. There's a phrase that I have been saying often, and a good friend of ours and somebody who loves our product is a two-time U.S. ultra running champion named Anthony Kunkel. And I actually shared this with him on a video. Said success is extremely boring. And I give the example. You look at Michael Phelps. He swam the same 10,000 strokes every day in the cold water at the same time, 3 times a day, and ate the same 15,000 calories, not for months, not for years, but for decades. And he is the epitome of success in athletics, right? With the most gold medals, more than most of the countries on the planet, actually. How does that kind of ADA and that success is extremely boring resonate with you? And what is the magic? And maybe you need what we kind of label as a dysfunction as a positive, right? Maybe you need the ADD to be able to hone in on something that, if you just consciously look at it, I rode a lot of bikes, I swam a lot of laps, like that's kind of boring, but how do you put all those pieces together?
Yeah, this is a great topic, and I think it's valuable to really focus on and understand what's going on. I heard a great description just recently. I wish they told me this earlier, but someone was describing ADHD as basically it's just a low threshold for boredom. And so when you're bored, you check out. And so the start of my story that you mentioned, distraído, that means distracted, that was my essence in school because I wasn't stimulated. I can blame the teachers for not, singling me out and figuring out what's going to make Brad more focused today. No, I'll just send him to the principal's office because he keeps disrupting the class. And, school's an institution that is really appropriate for a small sliver of the kids that are, destined to be bookworms and follow that regimented path. And a lot of people that they're missing, they're falling through the cracks. And so when you look at it as a low threshold for boredom and you're going to bounce around and change the subject of the conversation if they're talking too long, the two people in the conference room that could have worked that out later, I have no problem with that characterization as opposed to the negative ones that you set us up here. So once you cross over that threshold and you're captivated by something, yes, indeed, you can figure out the nuance and the beauty of doing something that is apparently repetitive and boring to the outside observer. But there was no boring day in my 9 years as a professional triathlete. Even when we were pedaling for 7 hours on a single bike ride, we were going to be, having good conversation or checking our technique or timing ourselves if we're doing a difficult or challenging workout. Same with all the races that I competed in. Of course, they weren't boring. It was an extremely exciting and intense career. And even today, when I fire up my screen, now I think we're looking at a different challenge, which is there's so much stimulation and so much diversity that we can indulge these frailties that we might have for a low threshold for boredom. So for the first time, I'm talking about pedaling my bike all day 20 years ago, and that was, or 40 years ago, and that was, an effective way to, get focused and excel. But today, I think, we're suppressing some of our greatest gifts and talents and our calling because we're just the onslaught of instant gratification and stimulation is inhibiting us from finding out what really does make us tick.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some way to attach a bike, a phone, so you can be swiping while you're training. So you can get both dopamines.
You make that funny side comment, but what I also see today, kind of bring it back to the theme that we're going to be sticking with, is like there's so much quantifiable technology today and biohacking and all these things where we can outsource our intuition and our sense of motivation, discipline, readiness to train, all those things. Now we can outsource it into numbers and be consumed with data while we are exercising our body in a dynamic manner. And I think overall, I really want to, pull back on this high-tech life in pursuit of health because we're missing some of the lowest hanging fruit, which is, for example, waking up in the morning and assessing your condition from an intuitive perspective, rather than firing up the app that says today you're going to do 6 sets of these and 5 sets of those.
So I want to go back before we kind of move forward a little bit. Understand like a little bit how you were raised, and you have to think about the classic parents. You got a great accounting job. They must have been so happy. And maybe that's not true. And then you 11 and a half weeks into it, you're like, I'm retiring. They must have had thoughts. What was that like? What were your parents like growing up? And then what was that transition? And then, was there a time when they really bought in, or are you still managing that?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. And it's really interesting, because I think the last parenting generation was more hands-off than today. And, my kids are now 27 and 24. And I realized as soon as they were born, almost, as soon as they were getting placed into this mother's group or that mother's group or this preschool or that preschool, it was the age of the helicopter parent, often known as the lawnmower parent, which is one step even more hands-on than the helicopter's watching over the kid all the time, and the lawnmower's, mowing the path so the kid can walk without struggle or difficulty. And particularly when it came to athletics, I realized with my son, he was a good little athlete. Especially basketball was his favorite sport. And when he got into 5th grade, I realized that I had to throw him in with the wolves if he really wanted to pursue his dreams, because the sophistication of the youth athletic experience today is that if you don't jump in and get in with the big kids, you're not going to make the high school team, because the kids are so intensely trained starting really young. So I tried to, fight against the negative aspects of, for example, the AAU basketball scene, which is a little bit out of hand with the parental attitudes and the competitiveness from the stands. And it worked out well, because you find good mentors and people that have the high-minded coaching perspective. But overall, especially with academics and the pressure to get in to very, very selective colleges, much more selective than back in our day, things are a lot different now. But to go back and answer your question, my parents they had a pretty casual approach to parenting. I tried to honor that myself, because I feel like, a kid's natural destiny is going to be largely up to them. And the more you try to orchestrate and influence their path, the more you have the potential to screw them up. So like big picture parenting perspective is like, your job is to be the caddy in the golf analogy. You're carrying their clubs. You're going to open doors for them. You're going to show them opportunities. You're going to commit the resources if they want to go and study the native living peoples in South America, and they're totally fixated on that. We're going to find an airline ticket and some way to pay for that trip so you can go realize your dreams or sign up for the expensive basketball team or what have you. So my parents supported everything that all of the siblings did, and they didn't really exert a lot of pressure or try to orchestrate things. I remember my dad would have us at the dinner table, and it would be, we'd be done and we want to go play or do something. He'd say, hold on a moment, let me talk to you about some political views of mine. And this was a clear memory when we were little kids. We had to sit there, and it might have been a little boring at the time, but he was sharing some of the things that were about him. But he didn't cross over that line and say, don't do drugs, they're terrible. I never did any drugs, but because I didn't have an asshole parent that was trying to, control me and make me feel like I want to rebel. And I often reference, I think my sister was in that story too, but I talk about her on the podcast a lot, because she was a very, very good student, and it was completely natural and diluted or undisturbed by parental influence. She went into an elite prep school in Los Angeles. She went off to Yale University, and she was valedictorian of Yale University. Wow. So that's a pretty high standard, but no one ever pushed her. No one ever looked over her shoulder and said, did you finish your homework yet? Or any of that nonsense. And we see so many kids today and so many parents today that think that's what they want for their kids, or the kid thinks, gee, this would be great great if I could go to an elite Ivy League school. But by and large, the places in those institutions should go to the kids where it's naturally meant to be. And hopefully the admissions process is figuring this out. And it was all, a breezy path for my sister. Of course, she worked hard and had to, hit a lot of checkpoints. But I feel like the same occurred with me in athletics, where I didn't have hard-ass coaches pushing me too hard in high school to the extent that it might have risked burnout. And I didn't have high-pressure parents in the stands that were, bestowing praise on me if and when I placed highly in the race, and then, get heat if I didn't. So that allowed me to take control and have the full responsibility of my success or failure.
So their reaction as you kind of went into accounting and came out shortly thereafter, was that how was that? Maybe it was
good.
fairly hands off.
This is a funny one. I'm glad you reminded me, because I remember going out to dinner with my dad and announcing that I was going to quit my job and become a professional triathlete. And he didn't, like I said, he wasn't living and breathing my life at the time like today's parent might be. So he wasn't really familiar with the dynamics of the sport or where I might have stood with the prospects of doing something that ended up to be a 9-year career. And so he gave me a lecture about how the professional athletes of the world are freaks of nature, and you can't expect to, you shouldn't aspire to a career like that, because, for example, the basketball players are generally, 6'8" or 6'9" or 7'1", and the golfers, that was his sport. And he says the guys on the professional golf tour are the genetic freaks of 1 in a million, and that's why they make it out there. And so I kind of absorbed that, and I said, "Oh, but Dad, my running times are as good as some of the top pros. I am 5 minutes behind on the bike and 3 minutes behind on the swim, but if I just practice more, I think I can catch these guys." So, like I relate that story at the end of my first season, pretty soon it became clear, like, wow, this kid has got the juice and got what it takes to make it in the sport. And that was a big revelation for my parents, because they weren't looking at the magazine splits and the, how I was rising up the rankings. They were just, hoping that I was having fun and, doing something that I had passion for.
So this was very far from a willy-nilly, I think athletics is going to be fun. This was, you were already keeping up with their running times. It was a matter of honing in on that.
Maybe, Chris. I really, it was really a ridiculous, that's why I couched that at the first time I told my story, is like, it was complete folly. And so I think my dad wrapped up the conversation saying, well, this will be fun for a year and we'll see how it goes. Just like the kid who announces, "I'm not going to medical school yet. I'm going to travel around Europe for 9 months on the train." And the parents go, "Oh, wonderful. Take some good pictures and then get your ass into medical school." So that was sort of the vibe that this was a little dalliance in the middle of perhaps a promising career in the professions, as it looked like I was headed for.
And that first really big win was the Desert Princess, right? That was the race. How did you, like, and I think you were 28th, like second to last or something, coming out of the first bike, right? And then went into, it was bike, run, bike, or is it, no, it's run, bike, run.
Correct. Yeah.
And then you came off the bike, like, ahead of, how did that feel? Were you really aware that you were ahead at all the times? I know sometimes the courses can be laid out wonky and you don't even know where you stand.
Yeah, the detail's important there, because I talked about how I was in my own little bubble and I was focused on the process and I didn't have that outside pressure. So then comes this big race, and it was billed as the showdown between the two number one ranked guys in the world. One was the top triathlete and one was the top duathlete, which is the run, bike, run sport where they don't have water, often contested in the winter or whatever. And so everyone was wondering who is going to win the big showdown between, the one guy was undefeated. He'd never lost in duathlon, and the other guy was the king of the sport of triathlon. And so the nature of the race, where you run 6 miles, bike 38, and run 6, it got a lot of people excited that had never tried that particular format. And so they ran really, really fast at the start because you're fresh. You're usually tired when you run, but everybody just took off. And I made this calculation in my head where, okay, I'm going to have to run 6 miles again after biking a very hilly, windy 38-mile course. So on this first 6-mile run, I better just run within myself and pace myself to predict what I think I can do later on in the hot day in the desert. And no one else thought about it that way because they were all geeked up in the competitive, that unregulated competitive intensity where you certainly don't want to let your competition go ahead because you're so tough and you're so badass. So as soon as the gun went off, everyone took off. And I said, this is ridiculous. There's no way I can run that fast. And so indeed, I came in 24th place out of 27 pros after the first 6-mile run. Then we get on our bike and we pedal through the desert, and it got windier and windier. And it was a very, very tough course. I don't think a lot of people realize how tough the course was. So when I finished the bike ride, I just had my head down and I was pedaling at my own pace. And then I started on the final run. And so this is a rookie guy who's used to placing 19th, 23rd, 25th, 17th, 12th. I had a great race earlier in the summer, and I was so happy to get 12th against the top guys. So I was just running along, and all of a sudden, they call it a media vehicle. It's usually a flatbed truck, and there's a dozen people standing on the flatbed truck and taking pictures and watching, and that's what leads the race. You can see it when you're watching the New York City Marathon on TV. It's the press truck or the media truck. And so this truck is now right in front of me while I'm running down the final 6-mile course. And I'm asking them, hey, how far behind am I? Do you have any time splits to give me? Because I wanted to see, where the next guy was. And they're, I'm running along and I'm trying to talk and they're like, what did you say? And I said, time, how far behind? What's my split, And they're like, I don't understand. What do you mean? And they didn't realize that I didn't know I was leading the race. And finally someone said, you're it, dude. And I'm like, what? And I look back and there's no one behind me. And I look forward and there's no one in front of me. And what happened was some of the very favored guys in the race had bombed out and actually, steered their bicycle into a ditch in the desert and just passed out and stopped. And so I never saw that racer, but I knew he was in front of me because he was the best in the world, but not on this particular day. And so I made it to the finish line. I crossed the finish line and I'm swarmed by the, by the media. And they had 2 questions for me. And the first one was, who are you? And the second question was, did you complete the entire course? So not the greatest honor when you're, thinking that you're going to, hey, the media swarmed me at the finish and said, great job, Brad Kearns from Woodland Hills, California. No. They were like, what's your name? How do you spell it? And all that. But that was a big turning point in my life. But I credit that breakthrough result with that attitude and that disposition, not only describing it through my months of training getting better, but also in the race itself, where it's like, control yourself, do what works for you and do your best rather than get sucked in to the overly competitive modern world.
And that's actually a very typical strategy with running, right? My niece is a runner. She runs in college at Amherst, and like this concept. I love this story. She had some boy she was probably maybe 11 or 12, and he's like, I can beat you, and she's like, yeah, but we're doing 2 laps, right? And he took off. And I think that boy went home from school that day because he tried so hard and she won the race. But that is something that happens. It's interesting that a whole band, like basically all of the professionals, kind of fell into that on that day. And you actually won the next one too, right?
Yeah, so that's funny. So this was a 3-race winter world championship series of the sport of duathlon. So you understand the dynamics. The first race, I was 24th place after the run, and I came into, leading off the bike and then expanded my lead on the second one. So then here's the second race, and we take off on the run, and I'm running along on the road, and I kind of look over, and it's like the flock of the geese, right? So I'm in the front, and now everyone's like, well, I'm going to run this guy's pace because he torched us at the last event. And so now I'm running in a pack of 12 that is my doing because I'm the one who knows how to pace the race. And of course, the stories afterward were like, tell us about your race, Brad. And I said, well, I let everybody go because I thought they were all being stupid and running way too fast. So that was kind of fun to have the pack with me, and the entire race dynamics change. But Chris, this was a great start to my professional career. But I'm going to admit now that like all of a sudden I started getting all this attention and expectation and started to feel those outside forces that I reject and criticize in my earlier story. So I became the person that I didn't want to be, sort of, because all of a sudden everything I was doing was far more important than the anonymous kid who was just out there training all day and having fun. And so I had to learn to recalibrate, and that recalibration came as a consequence of getting my ass kicked because I pushed myself too hard in training coming into the later races in that season, for example, or the next season. And I had to learn, okay, maybe I'm not such hot shit after all, and I have to listen to my own body rather than think that I rise above all the laws of stress and rest and performance and recovery just because I succeeded. Now it was time to get a grip again and again and again. And it was a recurring theme throughout my careers. When I could honor myself and cultivate that pure motivation again, that's when I was able to excel on the race course and back off those competitive intensity dials a little bit and not be such a badass every single day.
It kind of throws race day into a different plane, right? Which is where if everyone's doing their own thing, which they should be doing, right? I think that's the case that you're making, is that you really should be doing the thing that's best for you. And then you arrive on that day, and whatever happens that day, yeah, you have probably a lot of control of where you're peaking and stuff. But there's other pieces which are like, just as your physiology, right? That training block or not. Does that resonate at all?
Oh, for sure. And it also causes me to think of a bigger picture here where, not everyone is destined to raise to the top of their profession and have a million followers and whatever these dreams that are shoved down our throat even today. Dr. Anna Lemke, the author of the great book Dopamine Nation, she was a guest on my podcast, and she gave an epic quote that I have written on my wall of fame of quotes. She said, the pursuits that you do in life can take on epic proportions, but it doesn't mean that you have to climb to the top of the mountain. So what that means is, this may be, your destiny might be to become the 17th place athlete in the race. And that's a fantastic accomplishment. There's a lot of training and dedication behind it. It didn't seem like that was my destiny. And I thought that, I had thoughts and beliefs that I could do better. But there's people in athletics where, genetics becomes a huge factor after a while. And I, started to really want to be the number one guy in the world. And I would tell everyone that. And my goal is to be the champ. And I'm going to do whatever it takes. And then I spent some time training with the number one ranked guy in the world. At that time, it was Mike Pigg, my peer, who trained up in Northern California. And I went and stayed with him for a week one time and saw what the number one ranked guy in the world did every day and how he lived his life. And at the time, my best ranking was number 3. So I was right there close to him, and I beat him once in a while on the race course, and he beat me 10 times for every time that I beat him, right? But seeing the difference between number 3 and doing it my way with contentment and satisfaction and enjoying my life and enjoying the process. But I realized that I was not that person, and I was not willing to do some of the things that it took to jump up to number 1. And so I realized I was lying to myself and fooling myself and tricking myself. And I think today, when we're scrolling through our social media feeds and people are telling us how to go 10x on your business in the next 90 days, all that nonsense gets into our brain and it has a harmful effect. So whatever you do, make sure it's something that you have, a tremendous inspired purpose to follow, but don't worry about ranking yourself all the time from the outside world. And I know we need to make a living and we need to be responsible and we need to pursue, the economic consequences of what we're doing. But when that stuff can kind of land in a healthy perspective rather than get programmed and brainwashed into, you need an obsessive drive to grind every single day, and you need to get up at 4:30 a.m. while everyone else is sleeping, and that's how you're going to get the edge. That's nonsense, and it's bullshit. And that's what my racing story I kind of try to apply when I'm giving a corporate talk or what have you.
Yeah, I love it.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes. Send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code. That'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
All right, so let's start talking about the new book. On the Melanie Avalon podcast, it's called the Melanie Avalon Biohacking Podcast. It was like 2 years ago I heard you talking about overtraining. Today you've talked about unregulated, competitive kind of nature mindset. When did your awareness of so you've already talked about kind of overtraining. What I want to ask is, how long is this book, Born to Walk, which is, obviously a direct contrast to Born to Run? How long has that been cooking in your brain?
So Mark Sisson and I have been writing books together for 16 years now, many, many books, starting with the Primal Blueprint, which came out back in 2009. And we both have the similar endurance athletic background. Mark's older than me by a decade or so, and he was, an Ironman triathlon 4th place in the World Championships finisher. He was a top marathon runner, and then he coached me while I was a professional triathlete, and that's how we met way back in the 80s. So in working together and writing these books, it's great because we both have this shared perspective about what that extreme endurance training regimen and lifestyle really represented, and some of the flawed notions and drawbacks of plunging into that world, whereby it can affect your physical health and also adversely affect your mental health. And the main one is the overtraining, exhaustion, fatigue, injury, breakdown that is often a consequence of pushing your body hard on these extreme endurance challenges.
So, so really, this has been kind of formulating all the way back when you're in championship mode. Would there be any advice that you could have received early on, maybe way back, I think even back into college, right, when you had that burnout that might have landed really well, that maybe somebody in our audience who's considering, well, this, again, anytime you're pursuing something so heavily, it can have adverse consequences if you're not aware. Any kind of advice you might have given to yourself to maybe, you learned a lot and you learned it the hard way, any advice you could have received?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, this struggle and suffer your way to fitness is marketing folly and hype and deception. And the true way to become excellent as an athlete is to build and build and build and get stronger and fitter over time without the interruption of overly stressful training practices. It seems like we're so, programmed to instant gratification these days that we just want to go and push ourselves at that 6 a.m. spin class and flood our body with feel-good hormones, the endorphin chemicals, and get this payoff rather than paying the price and building fitness the correct way with patience, and the discipline is applied not to get out of bed every day like Rocky Balboa, but the discipline is applied to take care of your body and honor those needs for stress and rest balance and sufficient recovery when you do challenge yourself. But what's funny is the example set by the elite athletes in every endurance sport for the past 60 years is quite disparate from what the average recreational enthusiast does to their body when they're training for these signature events like the marathon or the Ironman triathlon. And the elites are so fit and so well adapted to endurance training that they're not pushing themselves with their tongue hanging out every day and coming home and collapsing on the couch. They're coming home and raking the leaves and making some phone calls and having a meal and enjoying some downtime, but they are training well within their capacity almost almost all the time. Jakob Ingebrigtsen, one of the greatest endurance athletes in the world. He's a top middle distance runner in the world. He excelled at the Olympics. You just saw him, the Norwegian. And there's a beautiful feature article in the New York Times talking about his lifestyle and his training. And one of the takeaways is he says, I never pushed myself beyond 87% of my capacity in training. And so you'll hear him at a press conference before the race and they say, how do you think you're going to do? And he's a very cocky guy. He does a lot of great trash talking and he backs it up too. So people kind of misunderstand him sometimes, but I love the guy. I have no offense whatsoever with all his proclamations. But he says, well, I think I'm going to beat everybody as usual, but I don't know exactly how fast I'm going to run because I haven't discovered that limit yet. I've just been training carefully to unleash the dragon when it comes time to run around the track in the big race. So someone who never exceeds 87% capacity in training. Now I'm going to take you on a tour of the nearest 1,000 CrossFit boxes where every morning at 6 a.m. people are on their hands and knees and feeling dizzy and bombed out because they've pushed themselves to 101%, and they do it on Wednesday and they do it on Saturday too. So all of us need to collectively back off and understand that the body responds to things like a consistent application of an appropriate training stimulus that allows you to recover and build without needing to, the term crushed workouts that has become so popular. I'm totally calling that out as stupid. You don't need to crush workouts. You just need to, appropriately proceed through good decision making and challenge your body and keep consistent with that.
Yeah, it's CrossFit and Orange Theory, right, are two of the ones where they're really just highly. I've had a number of interviews, and maybe this applies more to women than it does to men, where it's just detrimental to be stressing your body. Like, don't think of it as working out because that has the positive connotation. Think about it as stressing out your body. And if you go like, should you be stressing out your body? You should be stressing your body, but not stressing out your body.
Yeah, I was listening to someone recently even calling out the term workout. And workout implies work and, drudgery. And you could call them training sessions and color it a little bit differently. And it's kind of cute. Our use of language is important. And when you go out and do a training session, rather than working like a slave, like a dog, your perspective might change a little.
There's a phrase I really like in that vein, which is working out or training is not the penance you pay for the food you ate yesterday. It's a celebration of what your body can do. And I think that's a lot of fun. The book is Born to Walk. Obviously, a compare and contrast with Born to Run is a necessity. How would you compare and contrast? And to be honest, I haven't had a chance to read your book and also haven't read Born to Run. So give us what is the some kind of underlying messages or overriding messages of the two and how they might compare and contrast.
Yeah, a lot of folks in the endurance scene are probably familiar with the best-selling book from 2009 titled Born to Run by Christopher McDougall. And he's a wonderful writer, and he told this fanciful tale of some of the elite ultra marathon runners from America traveling down to remote Copper Canyon in New Mexico to encounter these primitive living Tarahumara peoples down there. And the Tarahumara are known for these incredible endurance feats that they perform in the course of daily life. So they'll have little competitions where they kick a little ball around for 50 miles or 100 miles, and they'll wager on which group is going to beat the other guys. And so they have extremely amazing endurance attributes. And then, of course, some of the top ultra runners who have now risen to fame in kind of mainstream endurance athletic coverage with places like Outside Magazine and all the sponsorship and these major events that occur in series around the world. And so, the ultra running community is led by these guys and gals that can run 100 miles at quite an impressive rate of speed and go take it far beyond what you see like in the Olympic marathon. So it's the ultra scene. It was glorified by this book. And there was a lot of themes coming in about how humans are really amazingly genetically adapted for amazing endurance feats. unlike any other animal on the planet. We are by far the most adapted endurance creature. And there's a funny video you can find on YouTube, probably several, where they have a hypothetical race with a bunch of different animals on the starting line. And so you have the cheetah, the antelope, the bear, the human, and whoever else thrown in. And of course, the cheetah is going to be way ahead at the 200-meter mark, the lion's just behind, and then the antelope is going to go for, a mile and beat everybody. But then when you take it out to like 100 miles, the top human ultra endurance runners can even be superior to a horse when it comes to going for long, long, long distances. So we take this insight from evolutionary biology that humans are upright and bipedal and have sweat glands, and we have sponge-like extremities that help us absorb impact, and we're capable of performing these amazing endurance feats, as did our ancestors on occasion, as they became the greatest persistence hunters ever known on the planet and rose to the top of the food chain. So we glorify our amazing genetic gifts for endurance. Then we stack on what these folks are doing in remote Copper Canyon in Mexico. And also there's a lot of lore about the great East African long distance runners. They're the most dominant group of athletes in any sport ever in the history of the planet, with 80% of all the top marathon times in the history ever recorded are from athletes in a small section of East Africa known as the Great Rift Valley, nations like Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda. So we have these outliers, and they're famous and they're glorified. And so it inspires the average recreational enthusiast to lace up their shoes and take off running down the road and train for a signature event such as a 26.2-mile marathon. So in the book Born to Walk, we're kind of recalibrating the misinterpretations and the misappropriations of evolutionary biology insights to the average modern citizen, where whatever genetic gifts that we might possess as a species for endurance are buried under a lot of excess body fat and dysfunctional feet because we wear shoes all the time, and dysfunctional musculoskeletal system because we're sitting in chairs and deactivating our glutes and shortening our hamstrings and causing all these, diseases of sedentary living. They're not going to be cured by shuffling down the sidewalk and, going for these goals that we've been glorified to pursue.
And so one of the things that you mentioned, and I know I saw this in some of your interviews, is the damage that shoes have done, the kind of modern running shoe. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a huge, huge industry, right? Nike invented the first elevated cushion running shoe in the mid-70s and became one of the leading global, brands and the most successful advertising campaign of all time with Just Do It, and their slogans and their taglines. They become part of culture. But this invention of the elevated cushion running shoe essentially enables people to run who should not be running, because running is too inherently stressful to the body and injurious. And the research today on the rate of running overuse injuries amongst regular runners is absolutely shocking and embarrassing. There's different studies from across the world. Yale University School of Medicine says that 50% of regular runners are injured every year, and that 25% of regular runners are injured at any given time. Wow. And the injuries come from the shoes enabling people to exhibit poor form and run for miles and miles and miles down the paved roads of America and the world. And so what's happening when you put on these shoes is, first, you're disconnecting the proprioception, the neural feedback that comes from the bottom of your feet when you land on the ground, sent to your central nervous system so you can organize your kinetic chain activity. That's all gone because you're wearing these super cushioned shoes where you don't realize the effect of the pounding that's occurring because the sole is blocking your brain from the pain sensations. Compare and contrast to taking your shoes off and running down, let's say, the sidewalk, or running down a hard floor indoors. You will immediately exhibit perfect running form, no matter who you are and how bad your technique is now and how out of shape you are, how heavy you are. If you are forced to run barefoot on a hard surface, your brain and your body and the soles of your feet will organize immediately to allow you to run with a graceful, proper midfoot landing over a balanced center of gravity and the arch tightening, the Achilles tendon fully extending, and then pushing off the ground with wonderful distribution of, it's called elastic energy transferred into kinetic energy, so you can push off the ground and generate forward propulsion. Now, you're not going to be able to go run for a mile or 2 or 5 barefoot on a sidewalk because you haven't done so your whole life, but it's part of our human aptitude and how our joints and connective tissue is organized that we're actually capable of it. We're just not resilient because we've never done it. But the Tarahumara can go and run 50 miles over rugged mountains and trails and canyons, and they famously wear tire treads that they tie with leather straps around their ankle, and that's all it is a simple tire tread. And it actually inspired the brand Luna sandals and some other copy brands now, where you see these minimalist sandals. That was barefoot Ted McDougall, a ultra running character, went down there, saw what the Tarahumara were using, and came back to a factory and started selling them to eager Westerners.
So what kind of shoes do you use these days?
Oh my gosh. I'm part of the launch of the Peluva minimalist shoe company with Mark Sisson and his son Kyle Sisson, and we're so excited to be out of the gate now for just a little over a year. But we make the ultimate barefoot shoe that has really ever been designed. So it has the 5 articulated toes as the key feature, because you hear a lot of talk about this barefoot shoe, that barefoot shoe, and the minimalist shoes that have less padding and less elevation or no elevation in the heel. Those are a wonderful step up from the elevated, tightly restrictive shoes that cause so much foot dysfunction. But a true barefoot shoe has to have the 5 individual toe slots so that your foot can actually operate in a barefoot inspired manner. So the Peluva shoes, there's all kinds of different models. Some are a little more rugged for a rocky trail, and some are nice and soft that you can wear as you walk down the sidewalk and go about your busy day. But we also have some padding, some cushion, so that it's not so jarring to switch from a lifetime in these cushioned shoes to go walking down a hard sidewalk or hard indoor surface. And so it's kind of a compromise where you have the 5-toe design, but it's also very comfortable to wear all day on any kind of surface. And what we're doing is encouraging people to walk more and spend more time in a barefoot state indoors if you can, or in safe outdoor areas like going to the beach. We want to get back to this barefoot competency, which is the ancestral inspired living, where we're not blasting our eyes with bright light late at night, and we're not eating processed food. We're trying to live in a manner that's aligned with our genetic expectations for health. And barefoot is a huge disconnect today because our feet are horribly dysfunctional and often disfigured from wedging them in shoes all day every day. The research from American Podiatric Association, 83% of Americans complain of chronic foot pain. 83%. Wow. So if you don't complain of foot pain right now, you're an outlier. It's the norm 7%. To have aches and pains and tightness, and it's a wonderful goal to try to proceed carefully and gracefully over to a more barefoot and minimalist shoe experience. And we have a wonderful 88-page informative ebook that you can download and read for free if you go to peluva.com, Peluva. There should be a pop-up window saying, yes, I want the book and I want to learn how to get my feet stronger and how to gracefully transition to more barefoot-inspired lifestyle.
Excellent. We were rapidly coming up on time. I want to allow you so kind of quickly talk, why should we be walking over running? And then we'll get into wrap-up questions.
There's, people don't like to hear the word should. And so if you want some permission to run, if you're an eager runner now and you enjoy it, it all comes down to your training heart rate. And there's this concept of fat max heart rate. And that is the point where you're burning the maximum number of fat calories per minute with a minimal amount of anaerobic stimulation and glucose burning. So it's kind of the cutoff between a comfortable, energizing, nourishing, refreshing, fat burning workout versus a workout that is in the medium to difficult intensity levels that causes some a stress to the body and requires recovery time. And most people routinely exceed this very important fat max heart rate, because you don't really feel the strain or the training effect when you're exercising at a comfortable heart rate. But this is indeed the way to build aerobic competency and become a more efficient fat burning machine. This happens at the lower heart rates. If you start to exceed this fat max heart rate, of course you burn more calories, right? The faster you go, you burn more calories all the way up to sprinting, but you start to burn fewer fat calories in favor of a spike in glucose calories. And what this means metabolically, hormonally, is the workout becomes more stressful and more difficult to recover from, and counts, like we're talking about earlier, on that stress side of the balance scale. And we all know that walking is energizing, nourishing. It's a stress reliever. It's nothing like a running workout or an intense gym workout, where it's actually something that, you're pushing your body, you're challenging, you're having to focus, you're getting sweaty, and you feel a sense of accomplishment at the end, but you can easily overdo it. Where walking, it has unlimited benefit with almost no injury risk, because you're not incurring that impact trauma that you do when you break into even a moderate jogging stride.
One of the things that I think really triggered it for me to understand, like I believe in HIIT training and or maybe a better, some good resistance training, right? So to continuously be developing your muscles. I describe it to kind of friends and family. Hey, once a week you should be a little sore, right? Like you're improving muscle when you're doing that. When you get above this fat burning walk, which depending on your conditioning might be a pretty quick walk, like it might be really a really fast walk. When you get above it, you're actually breaking down muscle and then rebuilding it, but not strength muscle and not bulk muscle. So it doesn't have the benefits that you would get from a resistance training. You can just see yourself kind of lose the muscle, gain the muscle, lose the muscle, gain the muscle. Whereas just under that, you're actually burning fat, which is the thing that most people are really after. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, everything's oversimplified, so I don't want to get in trouble with the exercise physiologists and the training geeks, but it's fair to say that running is catabolic and walking is anabolic. Walking sends the signals for anabolism in the body to grow and recover and nourish and restore, whereas running is a breakdown activity, especially the way people do it today. Now, if you become super fit, like the great Olympic marathoner Eliud Kipchoge, the greatest marathoner of all time, or Ingebrigtsen, who I mentioned, an easy, comfortable aerobic outing for them is running 6-minute miles for 10 miles at high altitude or 15 miles. Now, relatively speaking, exercising at that comfortable, nourishing intensity level for the average person, you and I and everybody else, it's a medium or brisk walk. So we need to honor the example of the elite athletes when we look at them, and don't get fooled by the idea that, wow, look how fast they're running if they passed you running down the street. Yeah, they're flying and they're talking about what movie they saw yesterday, and there's no strain to the body in the manner that the average recreational enthusiast typically heads out the door, grossly exceeds that fat max heart rate over and over again and again, and turns into, in simplified terms, a sugar burner and a sugar chomper in real life. Because what you're essentially doing with your training program is you're exhausting and depleting yourself day after day after day. And when you deplete glycogen day after day after day, this is in complete conflict with our genetic expectations for health. Our ancestors never did this. Even with those amazing genetic gifts, they weren't out there training 40 miles a week in hopes of catching an antelope and becoming fitter than the antelope. It's not how it worked. Persistence hunting was largely through the brain, and that was our advantage at the top of the food chain, not our endurance gifts. So that part's been confusing and misinterpreted. But when you go out there and pound yourself and exceed that comfortable pace, you've launched into this cycle of what we call chronic cardio. And interestingly enough, when you do this, you not only have trouble losing excess body fat, but you will send the genetic signals to store fat, because that's another survival instinct. A genetically programmed survival instinct is that the body hoards fat when it's immersed first into overly stressful lifestyle patterns. And not only is it holding on to fat or adding fat, it's the wrong kind of fat. It's the extremely health destructive visceral fat that collects around the abdominal organs and has all kinds of adverse health consequences, far worse than the unpleasant accumulation of subcutaneous fat in your problem areas of your thighs or your butt or the places you don't like on your body.
And the way I think the message here is the way to get rid of that is walking. Like that is one of the best ways to get rid of that subcutaneous fat.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing because we've been so brainwashed about this calories in, calories out model of living and managing weight. And now finally, thankfully, many leaders, and there's complete consensus that the notion is nonsense, the way we interpret it. And so what we really want to do is see body composition and fat loss as a question of hormone optimization. And so you need to tone down the overall stress quotient in your life, get good at burning body fat around the clock by being active throughout the day. And then when you do layer in the properly conducted intense workouts such as strength training and sprinting, that's when you can kind of carve the physique of your dreams without that struggling and suffering and setbacks and frustration that happens when people are just seeing this as a go out and burn more calories. And then, like you said, you're going to leak in a little permission to have an extra dessert because you did that 6 a.m. spin class. I used to work for the company that developed the indoor cycling protocols and group cycling spinning. And we did research where we discovered that in a 40-minute spin class, the average enthusiast burns like 685 calories or something. And then if you go down to Jamba Juice and get a medium smoothie and a breakfast scone, it's like 693 or something. So like all that work, and then you just, washed it away in that flawed sense of calories in, calories out.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. All right. I actually have a whole lot more questions, but we have come to time. So I want to jump to our wrap-up questions. If we could do these kind of rapid fire. First question, Brad, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
Oh, absolutely. 1, 2, 3, man.
I like it.
It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Why did I pick that? Besides the alliteration or the cuteness, the current world record is Jeanne Calment, a lady from France, and she lived to be 122 years old. She died in 1997. I'm fascinated by her. You can see a YouTube video interview with her when she was 119, and she was spicy. She was like, did you once sell pencils to Vincent van Gogh in your shop? And she goes, yeah, he smelled of alcohol and he was rude. And it's all in French, but I want to talk a little bit longer because it's one of my favorite subjects on that rapid fire question in particular. We should all expect today to sail to 100. And if you don't expect to sail to 100, you are deliberately sabotaging that right now. And that includes your mindset. We all have the potential to escape from all the nonsense and the disastrous accelerated decline of aging that makes today's averages. It's pathetic to think that 80 is the average. So I think we should all sail to 100. And then from 100 to 123, that's when I'm going to, have to put that extra dedication, and I'm going to form this belief. And I really, truly believe it because I think you have to believe it first. And so I'm not just spouting off a number like some health influencers will say, well, I think I'm going to live to 180 because I'm going to biohack in my little chamber and freeze some of my limbs until they invent a new heart surgery. No, I'm going to live to 123, and I deeply believe it. I know it's going to be a bummer. I'm going to have to make new friends, but like I saw my father have a wonderful ride. He made it to 97. He had 95 awesome peak performance years, and then he slowed down and glided to the finish line. But he had to go through 2 full groups of golf buddies because all his longtime golf buddies disappeared. And then he started meeting this new guys at a new country club who were in their 70s when he was in his 90s.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think there is going to be some of that, and that's some of the pushback that some people will give is like, to outlive friends. Well, like find new ones.
I'm cracking the whip on my friends. I'm like, come on, guys, quit eating that shit. When we'll meet for dinner and someone shows up with a store-bought nachos, I'm like, that's garbage. Put that away. I brought some grass-fed hamburgers here in my little Tupperware.
Perfect. What are how long do you think humans can live? If your target's 123, how long do you think we can live?
Well, I'm really fascinated by the research on supercentenarians. And again, this is a little too much, sorry for rapid fire, but do you know how many people are over 100 living today in the world?
I don't.
500,000.
Wow.
500,000. I was shocked at how high that was. And that's why I think we should all plan on sailing to 100. Now, do you know how many people are over 110 in the world today?
Probably drops dramatically, maybe 1,000 or
219.
219. Yeah.
Scary. So there is some thought by the leading experts that there's these strong genetic drivers. Once you get over 100 and your chances of living to 110, you're going to have to get super ass lucky. So we're going to sail to 100. And then when it comes to 110, boy, let's see what happens in the next decades where we can, further optimize. But it starts to get a little dicey when you get up to the supercentenarian age.
Okay, so that makes sense. So we'll jot down, say,
I think 123 would be the answer because
there you go. Perfect.
The record's 122. We know 123 is not preposterous. If I said 180, I'd love to hear your readers say, "What an idiot! Where does he get off saying that?" And anyone who says that right now, I think they're just posturing.
Yeah.
123 is not posturing.
Yeah. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts, for longevity and a long health span that you would share?
Oh, for rapid fire, get up in the morning and your first act is to engage in some gentle physical movement. I call it my morning exercise routine. And I literally get out of bed, hit the deck, and start doing a blend of yoga and strengthening and stretching. And it's the best way to get the blood flowing, the energy moving through the body.
Excellent. So that's 1, 2 to 3.
Oh, the other one is clean up your act in every way. And it starts with food. That's simple because you can physically go down to your refrigerator in your cupboard and throw shit away that has these offensive ingredients. And I really appreciate some messaging going on today that like this obesity epidemic is not really because we're eating more food and exercising less than we did in 1973, because we weren't doing a lot of exercise in 1973 and we were still slamming cokes and going and getting root beer floats. However, it's the chemical processing and the extremely offensive agents that have pervaded our food supply that could be messing with our fat burning systems and our ability to regulate metabolism and body composition. So it's like, get rid of chemically processed food. And if you want to enjoy your life and go get some ice cream like I do on frequent occasions, go drive across town for a special event and get some gourmet handmade ice cream that doesn't have all the garbage in it, the stuff you get in the freezer at the grocery store. So number 2 is clean up your act with your diet. And then there's also some other ways to clean up your act, and that could be dysfunctional relationships and behavior patterns that are not serving you. So take a look and reflect on habits that you've fallen into that cause you grief and pain and suffering and don't accept it anymore.
Excellent. And what are 1 to 2 things people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
First, I think, is this struggle and suffer mentality that we've been programmed to believe by profit-making forces, especially in the fitness scene. You do not have to struggle and suffer and push yourself and endure to become a fit or even a super fit person. So I'd like to wash away that notion now and also follow up or piggyback on that a workout does not have to be this theatrical ordeal where you have to get in your car and drive across town and park and check in and get a towel and wait in line to get the right yoga pad. You can do a 1-minute workout right now in your cubicle with no space by dropping for a set of 20 deep squats. Or one of my rules in the home is when I ascend a staircase throughout the day, I sprint up the staircase every single time. I do fast feet like a football player, like a pretend football player, because I told you about my football dreams. But you can sprinkle in what I call micro workouts throughout the day, and they can have a tremendous accumulative benefit to your fitness.
Excellent. And Brad, how can people contact you?
Oh, you can visit bradkearns.com. You can visit borntowalkbook.com to learn all about our book and get these amazing bonus offers that we've put together. I'm also on the Be Rad podcast, and love to talk to you someday and turn the tables, man. We'll learn all about Chris. So we'll book a point, and that can be a great starting point for people that follow you to listen on the Be Rad podcast.
That would be awesome. How about social media? Any contact that you would prefer on social media?
People,
Instagram
if you have extra time to go on social media, let's take it tomorrow and do that 8-minute morning routine instead. And you can find me if you want on social media. You can DM me. You can do this. You can do that. But I actually was issued a challenge by my nephew to do a social media fast. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And I started on September 20th and it lasted until November 10th or something. And then I had to report back at Thanksgiving in front of the whole family. Now, I'm my profession entails posting on social media. So I posted, but I did not consume and I did not scroll for that period of time. Then when I returned, it was interesting because I was way more mindful that, okay, now I'm going to go relax, sit in the jacuzzi and scroll on my social media and look at my favorite sprint promoters posting or high jump videos and whatever. But I think it's not terrible and it's not ruining the world like a lot of people say, but it's our job and our responsibility to make it work for you and be very disciplined in the manner at which you consume social media rather than let it kind of fall into that distractibility category where it's getting in the way of your peak performance.
Yeah, no, I think a social media detox is probably a good thing. It's probably as good as some good, intermittent fasting or even 1 or 2 day fasts. What in the near future are you excited about?
Well, I mean, you're talking to an author who's slaved away over yet another book, and it's such an incredible ordeal, and I really love it, but it's really, really challenging. And anyone can imagine, like, one day you fire up a blank screen and here's a new Word file and you start typing. And then with a lot of hard work, and Mark and I are getting good at this and we enjoy it and we love it, but it is, it's a labor of passion, but it's also a grind. And so I'm so excited to share this work of art that we've worked so hard on for so long and get it into the culture, especially as a challenge to some of the stuff I'm calling out, like the flawed and manipulative messagings that we get from the running shoe industry and the fitness industry.
It's great that BRADD found athletics and writing to pour everything into. That's pretty awesome. Well, you can find him, bradkearns.com, BRADKEARNS.com, and Born to Walk Book, right? The whole borntowalkbook.com. Brad, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. You're a great interviewer. It's such a pleasure. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.